I smoothed out the wrinkles on my silk evening gown and took a deep breath. Tonight's celebration dinner at the country club was supposed to be a joyous occasion, marking my husband Michael's retirement after decades at the helm of Blake Enterprises. Little did I know, it would become the stage for one of the most shocking betrayals in my life. As we clinked champagne glasses with board members and their spouses, Michael cleared his throat. "I have an announcement to make," he declared, his eyes flickering toward a young woman at the other end of the table. My heart sank as I recognized Emma, one of the junior marketing executives. The way Michael looked at her made my stomach churn. "Julia and I have decided to get divorced," Michael continued, his voice unwavering. "I've fallen in love with someone else, and we plan to marry soon." A hush fell over the table as gasps and murmurs erupted. I felt all eyes boring into me, waiting for my reaction. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "You coward," I spat at Michael, my voice trembling with fury. "How dare you betray me like this?" "I'm sorry, Julia," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "But I've made up my mind. Emma understands me in a way you never could." Emma shifted uncomfortably, her cheeks flushed. I shot her a withering glare, wondering how this naive girl could be so foolish. As the dinner descended into chaos, I excused myself, desperate for air. Out on the terrace, I leaned against the railing, trying to steady my breathing. Anger and humiliation washed over me in waves. Michael had been my whole world for over 30 years. We built Blake Enterprises together, sacrificing countless nights and weekends. But this was how he repaid me, by casting me aside for someone half my age. I wiped away a stray tear, my jaw clenched with determination. If Michael thought I would give up without a fight, he was sorely mistaken. Game on, I thought grimly. The gloves are coming off. I tossed and turned that night, replaying the horror of Michael's betrayal in my mind over and over. How could the man I loved and supported for decades do this to me and our family? As the first rays of dawn peeked through the curtains, I knew I couldn't let misery win. If Michael wants war, then let's have it. I marched into the private bathroom and examined my reflection in the mirror. Though my eyes were puffy from crying, my resolve had never been stronger. I was Julia Blake, and I would not be a victim here. The first order of business was to hire a bulldog divorce attorney. My secretary lined up meetings with some of the city's best legal eagles. Within a few hours, I was sitting across from Rebecca Turner, a fierce litigator known for eating wayward husbands alive. "I want him to pay," I stated bluntly. As she flipped through my financial documents, Rebecca arched her perfectly groomed eyebrow. "Even with your assets, a bad divorce could deplete your net worth significantly. Money isn't an issue," I said through clenched teeth. "That cheating snake will pay for what he's done to me and my family." A wild grin spread across her razor-sharp features. "Let's make sure he pays for everything he deserves." Over the next few weeks, I followed Rebecca's guidance to the letter, mobilizing every resource at my disposal. Quietly, instructions were issued to Blake Enterprises' accounting department for a full forensic audit. Under the pretext of routine due diligence, every bank statement and every money transfer were combed through meticulously with a fine tooth. Rebecca advised me to sow seeds of doubt among board members, suggesting concerns about Michael's ability to steer the company properly given his emotional state. A few whispered comments, furrowed brows, and suddenly, the company I had helped build began to question my husband's leadership. Meanwhile, Michael sauntered around oblivious to the explosive situation I was creating around him. He thought I would just walk away, content with whatever scraps he threw my way during the divorce. Poor fool, he had no idea the hell I was preparing for. The forensic audit quickly bore fruit, revealing a tangled web of shady dealings all connected to Michael's desperation to impress his young mistress. Inflated expense reports, kickbacks from vendors, even outright embezzlement. He put Blake Enterprises' financial health at risk to fund his lavish courtship of Emma. I pored over the damning documents late into the night, my fury growing with each uncovered impropriety. This was the true depth of Michael's deceit. He was willing to sacrifice our life's work, the company we built from nothing, all for a fling with a girl young enough to be his daughter. The next morning, I delivered the audit findings to the board by hand, making sure to focus on the most serious violations with pointed comments. Clearly, Michael's judgment has been clouded by personal indiscretions, I said, careful to maintain a measured tone despite the storm raging within me. I dread to think how far this rot could have spread if left unchecked. One by one, the concern etched itself onto the faces of the board members. Even Michael's strongest supporters couldn't deny the evidence of his mismanagement and possible criminality. Michael himself seemed stunned by my revelations. He actually had the nerve to pull me aside and attempt to plead ignorance. "Julia, you must believe me. I never intended for things to get this far," he mumbled. "I made some mistakes, yes, but they were all for love." I recoiled from his clammy grasp, disgust written plain across my face. "For love? You jeopardized everything we built together for some cheap fling. I don't even recognize you anymore." As if summoned, Emma appeared in the doorway, her overdone makeup unable to mask the fragility beneath. Michael's eyes immediately locked onto her, his entire posture changing, as if their bond transcended the tawdry reality. "Don't worry, my dear," he cooed. "Once the old ball and chain is out of the way, nothing will keep us apart." The naked cruelty in his voice awakened an icy clarity in me. Forget taking him for everything he was worth. This man deserved to lose it all. I crossed the room and stood squarely between Michael and his prize. "Let me make one thing clear to both of you," I said, my voice cold and firm. "I'm not going anywhere. This company was my life's work before you came along, Emma, and I'll be damned if I let either of you destroy it with your recklessness." Emma opened her mouth in panic, her eyes flickering to Michael for support. I cut her off with a sharp gesture and turned my withering gaze towards my soon-to-be ex-husband. "I did not survive decades of your insufferable ego to be discarded in your twilight years," I said. "You want to play with this girl in the mud? Be my guest, but I guarantee that the only thing waiting for you is regret." Turning on my heel, I left them gawking in my wake. Already planning my next move, I let them have their fantasy. Their world would soon come crashing down. With the audit findings revealing Michael's misdeeds, I had all of the power to ensure a favorable divorce settlement. However, I intended to twist the knife even further before going for the kill. Requesting an emergency meeting with Michael, I put on my best contrite act when he arrived. "I've had some time to think about things," I began, wriggling my hands for emphasis, "and I realize how terribly I behaved." Michael's eyes widened in surprise, and I fought the urge to scoff at his naivety. "Really? Are you finally coming around?" "I was so hurt and angry," I continued, allowing my voice to quiver with feigned regret. "But now I see that I can't make you love me. You found happiness with Emma, and it's not up to me to stand in the way of true love." The smug satisfaction dripping from his expression was too much to handle. "Well, I'm happy you came to your senses. It's been hard enough without you making things worse with your vindictive attitude." I reached across the table and took his hand, adopting my best pleading expression. "All I want is what's best for you, Michael. That's why you need to end this relationship immediately." His brow furrowed with confusion. "Why would I do that?" Leaning in, I lowered my voice conspiratorially. "Because I'm afraid Emma has been using you this whole time, taking advantage of your generous nature for her own gain." Michael opened his mouth to protest, but I continued with my carefully crafted narrative. "I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I have discovered evidence that she has had other affairs." "Multiple affairs, Michael. She has been bleeding you dry to finance her indiscretions behind your back." His face cycled through a kaleidoscope of emotions: anger, hurt, disbelief. "No, Emma would never do that. We love each other." Putting on my most sorrowful expression, I patted his hand. "I'm sorry, but it's true. The bank records, the money transfers, it's all there in black and white. She has made a fool of you." Michael's shoulders slumped in defeat. For just an instant, I felt a pang of pity for him. It quickly passed as I recalled all the anguish he had put me through. If it's any consolation, this newfound wisdom has made me realize how deeply I have misjudged you over the years. I lied through my teeth. Why, if I had a partner who showed half the care and steadfast dedication that you have displayed, I would consider myself the luckiest woman alive. That seemed to bolster Michael's spirits somewhat as he mumbled a thank you. Men are so easy to manipulate when you master their fragile egos. As he left, I allowed myself a satisfied smile. Between the financial void awaiting Michael and the seeds of doubt planted about his precious Emma's fidelity, his world was crumbling around him. Just a few more pushes, and the entire facade would collapse in delicious ruin. With Michael reeling from my revelations about Emma's supposed infidelity, it was time for the kill shot. I called an emergency board meeting, and as the members filed in, I put on my most serious expression. I have some deeply troubling news about Michael's conduct as CEO, I said once everyone was seated. It's painful for me to do this, but I have no choice. I nodded to my assistant who distributed the audit findings and let the financial data speak for itself. Gasps and murmurs filled the room as people digested the scale of the embezzlement. You can see that Michael has been systematically stealing from the company to fund an unacceptable personal relationship. His judgment has been compromised to the point of gross dereliction of duty, I declared. Walter Grimes, a senior board member known for his unshakable ethics, presented the report with a look of deep disappointment. I had suspicions from the rumors, but never imagined the depth of Michael's betrayal. It's a gut punch. Believe me, Walter, I understand your pain, I replied, putting on my most mournful expression. Therefore, difficult as it may be, we have no choice but to remove Michael from his position immediately. A chorus of solemn nods rippled through the room. Even those typically loyal to Michael seemed unable to overlook his staggering lapses. My teeth, I forced out my next words. It truly breaks my heart to say this, but Michael's personal indiscretions appear to have sent him into an emotional tailspin, calling into question his fitness to lead this company. For the good of Blake Enterprises and our employees, I recommend an indefinite leave of absence on medical grounds while he seeks treatment. The cowardly reactions told me that they had taken the bait. By portraying Michael's ouster as a compassionate intervention rather than a straight termination, I had given them all plausible deniability to avoid feeling complicit in his downfall. As the meeting adjourned with the board's full endorsement, I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. Everything had fallen into place perfectly. The forensic evidence, the sowing of doubts, and now this cute. A part of me felt a flicker of sadness at how far my beloved husband had fallen, but he had chosen to throw away the life we built together through his arrogance and weakness. I simply ensured he suffered the full consequences. My reverie was interrupted by a ping from Rebecca, my lawyer. Pulling up her message, I read her concise update with a rush of satisfaction. The transfer of assets is proceeding as planned. The financial guillotine is ready. Just say the word. I typed a reply. Let the delicious ruin begin. The dominoes began to fall into place with ruthless precision. Within days of being forced to take a leave of absence, Michael found himself systematically frozen out of Blake Enterprises operations. Emails went unanswered and meetings were rescheduled until he became a ghost at the company that he once lorded over. He could only imagine the sinking feeling in his gut as the power that he had taken for granted slipped through his fingers. However, he knew that the worst was yet to come for this arrogant fool. Ms. Blake, my assistant said over the intercom, you have a visitor. Emma Carter is here to see you. A cruel smile appeared on my lips as I buzzed Emma in. She arrived right on schedule, looking like a rabbit caught in headlights. Although she tried to maintain her composure, I saw the cracks beneath the surface. What can I do for you, dear? I asked in my most saccharine tone as she took a seat. I trust this isn't about your extracurricular activities with Michael. I would simply hate for word of that unpleasantness to spread further. Her eyes went wide with panic. Oh, I'm sure it's nothing. I waved a perfectly manicured hand in feigned nonchalance, just that it would be an awful shame if those private investigator reports detailing your numerous other affairs ended up going public. Can you imagine the scandal? Emma paled, and I fought back the urge to cackle at her obvious distress. The phony dossier I concocted was truly works of art, but that's not true. She sputtered, Michael and I love each other. It's just us. If you say so, dear, I replied coolly. Though if I were you, I might be more concerned with his mounting legal troubles and the likelihood of financial ruin. That caught her attention, as I had intended. Leaning forward, I laid it all out for her in brutal clarity. The fraud charges looming over Michael, the asset freezes, and the inevitable collapse of his net worth once the divorce was finalized. Do you honestly think a man facing prison time and bankruptcy will have any qualms about leaving you high and dry? Or that you'll still hold any appeal to him once the thrill of your tawdry affair fades? Emma's porcelain features crumpled as the truth sank in. She was nothing more than a disposable plaything to Michael, shiny arm candy to be cast aside once she ceased to be convenient. She whispered, "You're lying," but it was clear that she didn't believe her own words. Smiling thinly, I delivered the killing blow. If I were you, I would get out while I still could. Cut your losses and find yourself another mark to leech off of. There are plenty of rich, desperate fools out there who can be exploited. A single tear rolled down Emma's cheek as she stared at me in a wordless stupor. I gave her a few moments to absorb the reality crashing down around her before delivering the final twist of the knife. "Oh, and one more thing. Before you go running back to that pathetic creature you've been bedding," I added with sugary venom, "I'd strongly advise emptying out any of Michael's personal accounts or assets you have access to. You'll need whatever you can get to restart your entrepreneurial activities." For just an instant, Emma's mask slipped, and I saw the ruthless mercenary parasite lurking underneath. That was all the confirmation I needed that my carefully planted mole had succeeded in guiding her towards the path of maximum damage. Nodding to herself, Emma stood and wiped away crocodile tears before squarely shouldering her false bravado. "You're going to regret this," she spat out, her voice trembling with utter lack of conviction. I simply laughed as she turned on her heel and stormed out. The delusional girl had no idea how correct she was, but not for the reasons she thought. Once this was all over, the only regret I would feel was not destroying them even sooner. The end game was finally upon us. Within weeks of Emma's hasty exit, the other shoe dropped with a reverberating thud that shook Michael to his core. I took no small pleasure in being present as the investigator from our corporate security team laid out the damning evidence. Bank statements, wire transfers, photos, an entire dossier documenting how Emma had systematically looted over 7 figures from Michael's personal accounts and investment portfolios. "She couldn't have," Michael stammered, his face becoming an ashen mask of disbelief. "We were going to start a life together." The investigator simply shrugged, his expression one of practiced neutrality. "I'm afraid the money trail doesn't lie, Mr. Blake. This appears to be a long-running scheme to drain you dry." Michael's eyes met mine, begging for a lifeline in the midst of the crashing waves of betrayal. "Julia, you must believe me. I never imagined she was capable of this." I crossed my arms and regarded him with utter disdain. "Really, Michael? Because it seems to me poor judgment and self-deception have become a pattern for you recently." His shoulders slumped in defeat as the weight of his situation crushed him. It would be almost pitiful if he were not such a despicable person, but I don't understand why. "Why would she do this after everything I gave up for her?" he choked out. This time, I allowed myself a ferocious smile. "Isn't it obvious? You were nothing but a means to an end. A vain and gullible fool ripe for being fleeced by someone younger and more attractive who knew exactly which strings to pull." Michael opened his mouth, no doubt trying to defend his precious Emma, but I silenced him with a raised hand. "Save your breath and what little dignity you have left," I said. "This is just the opening salvo." My smile twisted into something darker as I continued. "The avalanche is coming, and you will lose everything." Over the next few days, the full extent of Michael's ruin began to reveal itself. Financial penalties and legal fees began piling up, depleting his liquid assets. Forensic auditors found more questionable transactions and potential tax evasion schemes, bringing the wrath of the IRS down on him. Meanwhile, revelations of corporate misconduct that I had carefully stirred up stripped Michael of all remaining board seats and titles. He went from captain of a billion-dollar empire to an ostracized pariah within a month, leaving his legacy in tatters. The killing blow, however, came from an unexpected direction. The gossip rags and society pages that once fawned over his fairy tale marriage to me latched onto the scandal with ferocity. With the collapse of their non-disclosure agreement as part of the divorce proceedings, I carefully fed tantalizing tidbits about his affair and its accompanying spending sprees to key media contact. Soon, stories of poor, exploited Michael and his gold-digger mistress were splashed across glossy magazines in salacious detail. A scandal of such delicious karmic proportions was simply too irresistible to ignore, no matter how much old money was changed hands to try and suppress it initially. In one final insult, Michael's beloved country club membership was terminated under a cloud of humiliation. The old guard closed ranks around him like a vice, and he became a cautionary tale to be shunned and whispered about. When he inevitably crawled back to me begging for clemency and a chance to restore some fragment of his former life, I denied him with icy finality. "This is the bed you made for yourself," I said. "I suggest you learn to sleep in it." As he slumped away, broken and discarded, I felt an unfamiliar sensation bloom within me. Not quite happiness, but perhaps a sense of resolution. This chapter of betrayal and trauma had finally closed, allowing me to turn my focus towards what lay ahead. The machinations had been brutally unpleasant, but they were necessary to ensure my complete autonomy going forward. Never again would anyone compromise my destiny, for which I had fought so hard. I was Julia Blake, the newly anointed captain of my own destiny, and the world better be prepared for my merciless stewardship. As the dust settled on the scorched battlefield of my divorce, I wasted no time establishing my leadership at Blake Enterprises. Board meetings that were once merely a formality became arenas where I flexed my hard-won power. "Profitability is down by more than 12 compared to projections for the last quarter," I said in a tone that brooked no argument as I stared at the assembled executives. "I want to know why, and I want solutions on my desk in 48 hours. There was a moment of silence as the senior leadership team avoided eye contact, each silently hoping that one of the others would step forward first. Finally, Stephen, the chief financial officer who had been Michael's trusted lieutenant for years, cleared his throat. The shortfall can likely be attributed to recent transitions and their accompanying disruptions. He began carefully choosing his words. "Not to mention lingering public relations issues from," my eyes narrowed dangerously. "Do you mean the scandal that my late husband caused through his reprehensible actions? The one that put this entire company at risk through his reckless behavior?" Stephen visibly shrunk back, his face flushed. "Well, I didn't mean to suggest." "Save it," I cut him off with a withering glare. "I don't want to hear any more excuses about factors beyond our control. We make our own destiny here, and anyone unable to adapt to my leadership would be wise to explore other opportunities." The room went deathly quiet as the temperature seemed to drop several degrees. The gathered executives finally realized the new power dynamics. This was not the Blake Enterprises of the past, where decisions were discussed ad nauseum behind closed doors. No more consensus or democratic hand-wringing would be allowed. My edicts were final. "Miss Blake," said Maria, the head of operations, "if I may say so, your vision is a significant change from how we traditionally operated. An adjustment period will be necessary before we can realign our strategy." A few cautious nods rippled through the room, though most seemed to sense the underlying defiance in Maria's words. My jaw tightened enough to crack nuts. Slowly, I rose to my feet and fixed Maria with a stare that could peel paint. "Let me be clear about one thing for you and your colleagues," I said, my voice sharp as razors on steel. "I didn't survive decades of gaslighting and undermining by that spineless jerk. I called my husband only to be further diminished by his lackeys." Maria shrunk back in her chair, all bravado gone, as I strode around the table towards her. I could feel the others watching, a mix of disbelief and morbid fascination in their eyes. No one dared to interfere as a new order took hold. "This company's oligarchic days are over," I stated, leaning in until Maria was forced to maintain eye contact. "Either adapt to my leadership and start pulling your weight, or I will find those more suited to my vision. Have I made myself clear?" She nodded almost imperceptibly, seemingly having momentarily forgotten how to form words. Standing up straight, I turned my gaze to encompass the entire group. I did not fight through the depths of hell just to be undermined again. Blake Enterprises now answers to me and me alone. My lip curled slightly. And if that reality is difficult for any of you, I would be more than happy to help you transition into unemployment. The silence that followed spoke volumes. The machine had a new master, and woe betide anyone foolish enough to figure. As the meeting dispersed, I allowed myself a tight, predatory smile. This was merely a prelude, the first indication of the ruthless nature that would be necessary to remake this company in my image. Pity Michael didn't possess even a fraction of my strength or determination in those final years when he squandered his time pursuing youthful indulgences. Perhaps then, this bloody transition could have been avoided. However, in the end, his failures became my greatest advantage, the forge where my fierce independence was forged, where I emerged strengthened, unyielding, and finally in full control of my fate. I am Julia Blake, and from now on my name will be synonymous with strength, persistence, and relentless ambition. All that remains is for the rest of the world to pay attention. As I settled into my role as the leader of Blake Enterprises, the world began to notice the seismic shifts within the company. My leadership style, characterized by relentless drive and a commitment to success, marked a new era for Blake Enterprises. I was determined to remove the stench of ineptitude left behind by Michael and restore the company to its rightful position at the top. My first priority was to overhaul the executive team. Those who had been loyal to Michael were outmaneuvered by individuals who shared my vision and determination. The transition was quick and brutal, but necessary to eradicate the rot and create a culture of excellence. There would be no place for complacency. Under my watch, Blake Enterprises embarked on an aggressive expansion strategy. We targeted emerging markets, leveraging innovative technologies and strategic partnerships to outpace our competitors. The financials began to reflect our renewed vigor. Profits surged, and our stock price climbed steadily. Investors who had once doubted my capabilities now clamored to align themselves with our success. Despite the public facade of relentless ambition, the personal toll of my journey weighed heavily on me. There were nights when the echoes of my past haunted my dreams, and the loneliness of power became an inescapable shadow. But I had long learned to harness my pain as fuel, driving me to heights I once never imagined possible. It was during one of those introspective nights when we were reviewing our latest quarterly report that an unexpected visitor arrived. My assistant's voice crackled over the intercom, hesitating slightly before delivering the news. "Ms. Blake, there is someone here to see you. He says it is urgent." I frowned and glanced at the clock. It was well past business hours. "Who is it?" "His name is Thomas Grayson, and he claims to have important information about Michael." The name sparked a spark of recognition. Thomas Grayson was one of Michael's old friends and a shadowy figure who disappeared from the social scene years ago. I was intrigued and instructed my assistant to let him in. Thomas entered my office looking like a man who has seen better days. His once sharp features are now marred with lines of worry and fatigue. He holds himself with nervous energy as though he is always on edge. "Julia," he greeted. His voice was a mix of desperation and urgency. "Thank you for seeing me." I motioned for him to sit down, curiosity piqued. "What brings you here, Thomas?" "It's been years." He settled into the chair opposite my desk, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "It's about Michael. I know you probably don't want to hear anything about him, but there's something you need to know." I leaned back, folding my arms. "Go on." Thomas took a deep breath, his eyes locking onto mine. Michael didn't just have an affair with Emma. There were others, many others, but that's not the worst part. He was involved in some very shady dealings, money laundering, illegal investments, things that could bring down the entire company if they ever came to light. My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression neutral. "Why are you telling me this now?" "'Cause I owe it to you," he replied earnestly. I knew about some of his activities, but I turned a blind eye. I thought it was just business as usual, but it got out of hand. After everything fell apart, I started to piece things together. I realized the extent of his deception. and how it could still affect Blake Enterprises. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't warn you. I studied him, searching for any signs of deceit. But his desperation seemed genuine. Do you have proof? He nodded, producing a USB drive from his pocket. Everything's on here, documents, emails, transaction records. It's all there. Thank you, Thomas, I said, finally taking the drive. My mind was racing with the implications. If what Thomas had said was true, the consequences could be catastrophic. However, it also presented an opportunity to strengthen my control and eliminate any remaining traces of Michael's influence. He nodded, relief washing over his features. I hope it helps. As he left, I plugged the USB drive into my computer, scanning the incriminating data with my eyes. It was worse than I had imagined. Michael's web of deceit was vast and deeply entrenched, but this was my chance to cleanse Blake Enterprises once and for all. The next morning, I convened an emergency meeting with my most trusted advisors. Together, we formulated a plan to address the revelation swiftly and decisively. We would cooperate with authorities, conduct internal investigations, and implement stringent compliance measures. This would be a trial by fire, but I was determined to emerge stronger. As the days unfolded, the media caught wind of the scandal. Headlines screamed about Michael's criminal activities, but Blake Enterprises stood resolute. Our proactive approach and transparency won back the trust of investors and clients alike. The crisis became a testament to our resilience and commitment to integrity. In the end, Michael's downfall became the final catalyst for Blake Enterprises' rebirth. His actions had nearly destroyed us, but I turned the tide, transforming adversity into triumph. As I looked out over the city skyline from my office, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. I was no longer the woman scorned by betrayal. I was a titan, a force to be reckoned with. My journey had been one of pain, loss, and ruthless ambition, but it forged me into the unbreakable leader I have become. And I know, without a shadow of a doubt, that the future belongs to me.